Nigeria's Council of State met today in Abuja with members throwing their weight behind the redesigned Naira policy of the central bank, but the body advised that the financial regulator intensifies measures at making the new notes available or recirculate the old Naira notes to ease the hardship that the Naira swappers brought on ordinary Nigerians. The highest advisory organ, which deliberated for over 4 hours, also insists that all is set for the general elections to hold as scheduled in a safe atmosphere. The council received briefing from the chairman of the National Electoral Body, the Inspector General of Police, and the governor of the central bank. The hybrid meeting had in attendance former heads of state, General Yakubu Gowon, retired, General Abdulsalami Abubakar, retired, and former President Goodluck Jonathan, while President Olusegun Obasanjo joined the meeting virtually.
The deliberations of the council are one, that we are on course as far as election is concerned, and we are happy with the level of preparation by INEC and the institutions. And then two, relating to the Naira redesign policy, the policy stands, but then the council agreed that there is need for aggressive action on the part of the central bank as it relates to ensuring, as it relates to the implementation of the policy by way of ensuring adequate provision being made with particular regard to the supply of the Naira in the system.
Basically, what took more time was that of the monetary issue because of the hardship of money in circulation across the whole state. But generally, the views across board is that principally the policy is accepted. Just like any new policy or any new change, at the beginning people resist it, even though it's good. But generally it's accepted. But the major issue across board from all the states and most of the speakers is that of implementation. And so many views were proffered, particularly that the CBN governor should look into making sure that money is available, the new money is available in quantum. And there were suggestions too that if the new money is not in circulation or printing them could be difficult, the old money that hasn't been changed could be recirculated and pumped into circulation to ease the tension, particularly for the poor people in our society.
The chairman of INEC, who assured the Council of State their complete readiness and their state of readiness to ensure that the two elections of 25th February and 11th March, they are fully ready. He's given assurances that everything that they require, they have. And even in places where there's been a few disruptions, that they are convinced that they can bounce back. And specific mention were made of one or two places where they said they've recovered and that they've given the country assurance that everything that needs to be done to have the election at the set date are on track. And they thank both the executive and the legislature for supporting them.
All right, joining me now to put some perspectives into this headline political economic news of the week is Paul Alaje. He's a senior economist at SPM Professionals. Alaje joins me from our Abuja studios. Good evening, sir. Thank you for coming through tonight on the show.
Good evening, and thank you so very much for having me.
Let's start. What's your take on what has been reported so far from today's Council of States meeting?
Clearly, the Council of States agrees with the central bank and also agree with what most economists have submitted regarding the policy. The policy itself is very good. We all know, central bank is doing everything possible to manage money supply and also to intervene regarding currency in circulation. The central bank have said some of the monies are outside the banking covers and they are perhaps in people's home, people's water tank, and so on and so forth. Videos we saw on social media validated some of the argument of the central bank. Therefore, for those monies to return back to the banking covers and for people to be monitored digitally, it's important for the currency we spend to be redesigned. That was done. What seems to be the concern is the supply side. The supply side became an issue because those who have taken their monies to the bank, they are finding it challenging getting the money back. And we understand that central bank had mentioned that some funds have been sent back to the system, but because our economy is heavily dependent on cash and there seems to be some actors who have access to more cash than others, is making most people it's making life becoming tough for most of our citizens. The concern here is that even some persons have to buy monies that they are spending. The Council of State have given the president an option that let supply side increase significantly of the new currency notes, which I think is the first option and is what most economists have submitted, that the Central Bank of Nigeria should make more new notes available. If that is not possible, then we now need to go back to where we are coming from by recirculating significant part of that money that we have made gain by taking to the covers of the central bank, over 2 trillion according to central bank governor, which have been deposited with the Apex Bank. Do we need to now take those monies back, which I think is the consideration Mr. President, or whoever needs to take decision, we need to reconsider. But in my opinion, I don't think we should go that way. What I think we should do is to make new notes available, and as old notes are getting to the covers of central bank, they should be withheld and replaced immediately by the new note. I think the circulation, what we have in circulation right now, is too small because some person seems to have advantage by perhaps, I don't know, keeping the money again, while those who need to use it for some small transaction are really suffering, and they are going to banks, and the capacity of banks, again, which is another thing, I think the president should have, and Council of State might have inferred, is the fact that the networks, the capacity of the channels of many banks is becoming challenging as more people are now migrating and more depending on electronic means of having financial transaction.
So where we were over the course of the week was that the Attorney General of the Federation yesterday says the government will obey the Supreme Court order cancelling today's deadline. By today, what we have was to have what I could call, well, in a manner of speaking, the blue ocean, in which we will have the old Naira notes no longer in circulation, and we'll have only the 200, 500, 1,000 new notes in circulation. But that's not going to be. So do you agree that the Attorney General says the government will go to court and challenge the order issued by the Supreme Court about a few days ago?
Well, I carefully listened to the judgment, and I also have listened to the Attorney General of the Federation. Beyond what they are both saying, the concern is, how do we tell people who don't have access to this information that the money could be spent and they are somewhere in Ohimini, in Sokoto State, or they are in Abak, somewhere in South, or they are in Olu, somewhere in Imo State, that Supreme Court have passed a new judgment, and that as pepper seller, you can now accept the money, or as may borrow, or as food seller, amala seller, akpu seller, or tuwo seller, you can now accept the new note, or as vulcanizer. Our people don't have access to the information. We have spent a lot of energy to tell people from 10th, in fact, it was from 31st of January, stop accepting the new note. Later, it was extended to today, which is the 10th February, stop accepting the old note. You need to start accepting the new note only. Now, if you tell people that the Supreme Court has given a judgment, and there is every tendency that the federal government, through the Attorney General of the Federation, will challenge that judgment, you know that that judgment, even though it will stand, but when it comes to implementation among the people, because because it's supposed to be a judgment for the people.
It's an order.
How will people accept it? It's a different kettle of tea.
The Supreme Court will see here the substantive suit, but it's an order to reverse today's deadline, as it were. But where we are right now is that the Council of State says, yes, we agree with the policy, but we need more of the new and the new Naira notes in circulation for Nigerians. We need to make sure that the bankers are safe. It's safe to reopen all the banks. It's almost unheard of that banks are closed just because they don't have currencies. The lives and safety of bankers are jeopardized because of this exercise. So there's a very serious concern that hundreds of thousands and millions of bankers can't freely go in. There have been a couple of issues with fights and all that, damaging of bank facilities. But what has the new Naira notes exercise and the fallouts been discussed so far? What has it revealed about the structure and state of the Nigerian economy itself? What's the lesson we have here?
Well, I can tell you that the structure of the Nigerian economy, especially as it has to do with currency and the velocity of money, is perhaps what I can call hand to mouth. Over 70% of our population, and I've said 70% to be charitable, they live more or less hand to mouth. When you board a taxi, most of the time from the motor park, it is that moment after boarding the taxi, once they start the journey, that they will go to the filling station, which means most taxi driver, not all though, live by the day. People barely have savings. Central Bank has also revealed that larger number of Nigeria don't have more than 10,000 in their bank account at the end of the month, which reveals that is an economy that has a lot of informal sector, economy that has a lot of population with small amounts of money. The implication is that people would hardly live or without cash. That is, people largely depend on the small amount of money. And if you look at the crisis we have with this new structure, most people are not against the structure. What people are concerned about is, where is our money? And in a case where they need to depend on alternative channels such as POS to access their 10,000 Naira, the POS operator on the average is asking for 2,000 Naira. That means inflation is not the one that stole 2,000 Naira from them. It is now the system that is stealing 2,000 Naira from them. Even at the moment, meanwhile, inflation at the end of the year, we steal about 21 Naira, we steal about 2,100 Naira from them. So people are frustrated, not because the policy itself is bad, but they are frustrated because they feel that rather than the policy bringing succor, bringing progress to us, the implementation of the policy because of the system is highly undependable. And I can tell you that Central Bank knows it cannot do this alone. It needs to work with the commercial bank. Unfortunately, the commercial bank are saying we don't have enough money. But Central Bank governors stated time and again that they have sent enough cash to commercial bank. The question is, who is taking our money? The new notes that have been printed thus far, where are they? Have they ended up in a different location? Or why is it challenging that with all the numbers Central Bank is mentioning, it seems not to be sufficient for Nigerian people? Could it be that we have underestimated those that have piled up money, or could it be another trick that people have started piling up money, perhaps against the next election or for another purpose entirely? If not, that means the central bank, as we have maintained as economists, and many of us around the country have said, whatever the case may be, supply side needs to be stimulated. It needs to be stimulated up to the same volume we have in the circulation today, and channel of connection must also improve.
Hold on a second, Paul Alaje, respectfully. That's a big point you're trying to raise. The central bank says there's so much currency outside the banking system, it doesn't want that much money out there just floating around, used to heat up the FX market and all of that. This has been a mantra we've heard over the months and years. So why do you think the central bank should print? If you have 1.7, 2.4 trillion Naira in old currencies in circulation, do you think the central bank should print the same 2.4 trillion Naira back into the system?
Definitely not. I'm not saying the central bank should print the same 2.4 trillion naira back into the system. But it's very obvious. If you leave Ireland and you go to the neighboring places in Lagos where you are, I am here in the heart of Abuja, Maitama, and I can tell you the nearest ATM, once people smell money, they've not even heard. If they could smell that money is there, you see fight and fight and fight, because people feel that there is scarcity of money. And when there is scarcity, black market will show up, parallel market will show up. That's why charges are there. If there is sufficiency or there is supply side sufficiency in the system, we will not have any extra charge. The way we can know whether what we have put in the system is sufficient is by measuring the level of scarcity. And I can tell you that when people are no longer queuing up and online platform can accept more people, then what we have in the system will be enough. The only way to test in economics whether the supply side is good or not is what happens to level of scarcity, and do we see our black market showing up. If you come to Abuja, and I can tell you the same for Lagos, they are still queuing some filling stations, and they are still black market hawking PMS on the street of Abuja especially. The only way we can stop that is when we have sufficient in terms of supply side, because there is such shortage in the system. What this tells us is that there is a shortage in the system. What central bank also need to look carefully is perhaps to look at the number again. We understand some volume has been sent to the system, but if this volume have penetrated enough into the system, I think the kind of shortage we have now will not be there. And you know that last week, even up to this week, the network of many banks have been really very, very challenging, because that would have been an alternative platform that people could go and become used to, so that we become less dependent on cash. Yes, economic activity must go on, and we must discourage the use of cash in volume. But if that is not done, unfortunately, people still want to live. People still want to live. They want to send their children to school, and they still need, no matter how small in terms of volume, some cash to be with, to be in their pocket, because the economy is highly dependent on it.
Paul, in terms of this exercise, what does it throw up? And I'm going to get this question back to you. What does it throw up about the structure of the Nigerian economy, not the policy of the new Naira notes? I'm just saying, what does it show that we could barely afford to live without that money, the velocity for majority of Nigerians at the bottom of the pyramid, without this cash? What does it show about the size of our informal economy? What do you think the next administration needs to do to cut down on poverty, because folks are ready to just injure each other, injure bankers, put their lives at risk just because they don't have access to 500 naira, 1,000 naira, 5,000 naira?
The structure of the economy it makes my heart bleed, I must confess to you. And when you look at the report coming from Nigerian Authority talking about National Bureau of Statistics, we have over 130 million poor people. They don't have up to 30,000 naira in their bank account. Some of them don't, most of them don't, some of them, I should say, don't even have bank account at all. So what they depend on is cash. Even some persons feel that if they transfer money, they are not literate enough, because when you look at the number of volume of people we have out of school children in the last 20 years, because they will not suddenly become educated. They have been left uneducated. These people are now those that work as labor, what we call foremen, that help us with on several construction sites. So on daily basis, people on construction sites still need to hold the money, because when you send money to them and they go and collect it across POS, they don't want to lose 1 naira. But the POS person, even when this policy was not in place, we charge them 100 naira out of 5,000 naira or 10,000 naira. They believe is a measure of their blood. So the percentage of 100 naira to a poor person whose daily income is 2,000 naira is too much compared to a man who is relatively wealthy or middle class. And we don't have the middle class and the and the rich in high volume. What seems to be ubiquitous across states in Nigeria is poverty, hunger, and deprivation. And you cannot build an economy outside your population. The capacity to produce of our people is very low, because in themselves, the volume of education and skill they have to produce economic prosperity is very low. The next administration has a lot to do. It is not time for anybody to get to rally and dance or give sweet words or sing sweet song or wave at people. The next leader must wave his sleeve. Whether it is Babariga, it has to be kept separately. If it is suit, he needs to remove the tie. The next leader must know, how do I build a country beyond growth to the point of development. And when we talk of development, we also build a country. Then in the next 8 years, Nigeria, among African nations, will be the most desirable place for people to live in. And this will be evident in the following. I mean, power supply, even though you cannot do 24 hours, at least 20 hours power supply, especially to our production zone. Nigeria export must significantly improve compared to what we have now. And I can also tell you that the number of people that are poor in Nigeria, over 130 million, living under multidimensional poverty, must reduce significantly by 80%. How do we do all of this without just brick and mortar? How do we improve on internet penetration and modern education, and not just within the four walls of schools, to our people? How do we improve significantly on capital? All monies that comes, whether through borrowing or from crude, how do we put it directly on infrastructure so that we can build our people? But more importantly, those that we don't pay so much attention to are state governors. State governors achieve economies of state, and technically the federal government is also the economies for the entire federation. But how do we have state governors who understand that their policy can make their people rich or to remain in abject poverty? The next leader must be one who goes beyond just bringing people together, who goes beyond just telling people what he will do, but will be willing to develop the economy truly and indeed.
All right, thank you so much, and we appreciate your perspectives as always. So do have a great weekend. Paul Alaje, senior economist at SPM Professionals, discussing Nigeria's state of the nation.